What if the very algorithm you created to revolutionize an entire industry became the weapon used to destroy the company that stole it from you? Rebecca Martinez thought she was building the future of financial technology. Instead, she was about to witness one of the most spectacular corporate implosions in Silicon Valley history. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. Rebecca Martinez had always been different from her colleagues at Nexus Financial Technologies. While most of the engineering team spent their evenings at happy hours discussing the latest JavaScript frameworks, she locked herself in the company's empty conference rooms, scribbling mathematical equations across whiteboards that stretched from floor to ceiling. Her obsession wasn't with code, it was with patterns. Growing up in Phoenix as the daughter of a construction worker and a high school math teacher, Rebecca learned early that numbers never lied. People did. Systems did. But mathematics? Mathematics was pure truth. This philosophy would later become both her greatest strength and the source of her downfall. When Rebecca joined Nexus in 2019, the fintech startup was struggling to differentiate itself in an oversaturated market. Founded by Harvard MBA twins Cameron and Derek Ashford, the company had raised $12 million based on a flashy pitch deck and their father's connections in venture capital. But beneath the sleek office space in downtown San Francisco and the endless supply of kombucha on tap, Nexus was hemorrhaging money with no clear path to profitability. The Ashford brothers had hired Rebecca specifically for her doctoral work in algorithmic trading at Stanford, where she'd developed what her professors called revolutionary approaches to market prediction. Her dissertation had explored how micropatterns in trading data, invisible to traditional analysis, could predict market movements with unprecedented accuracy. While her academic peers published papers that gathered dust in digital libraries, Rebecca wanted to build something that would change how people interacted with their money. Her first 6 months at Nexus were frustrating. The existing platform was a basic robo-advisor, similar to dozens of competitors, offering cookie-cutter investment portfolios based on simple risk questionnaires. Rebecca pushed for innovation, proposing they leverage her pattern recognition research to create something truly groundbreaking. The Ashford brothers nodded enthusiastically during her presentations, but seemed more interested in discussing the company's upcoming Series B funding round than implementing her ideas. Everything changed during a particularly brutal product review meeting in March 2020. The COVID-19 pandemic had just begun wreaking havoc on global markets, and Nexus's clients were panicking as their portfolios plummeted. Traditional robo-advisors, including Nexus's platform, were failing spectacularly because they relied on historical data that became meaningless during unprecedented market volatility. "We're losing clients faster than we can acquire them," Cameron announced to the room, his usually polished demeanor cracking. "Our churn rate hit 37% last month. At this rate, we'll be out of business by Christmas." Rebecca saw her opportunity. She'd been working nights and weekends on a personal project, an algorithm that could analyze not just market data, but the interconnected web of social media sentiment, news cycles, regulatory filings, and even satellite imagery to predict market movements in real time. Unlike traditional models that looked backward, her system was designed to see around corners. "What if I told you I could reduce that churn rate to under 5% within 3 months?" Rebecca said, standing up in the back of the conference room. The room fell silent. Derek laughed nervously. "Rebecca, that's impossible. Even the biggest firms can't." "Give me 2 weeks," she interrupted. "Let me show you what I've been building." Those 2 weeks became the most intense period of Rebecca's career. She practically lived at the office, surviving on energy drinks and the determination to prove that her vision could save the company. Her algorithm, which she privately called Oracle, didn't just analyze data. It synthesized information from hundreds of sources simultaneously, identifying patterns that human analysts and traditional algorithms missed entirely. The breakthrough came on a Tuesday evening when Rebecca was testing Oracle against historical market data from 2008. While conventional models showed the financial crash as an unpredictable black swan event, Oracle identified clear warning signals months in advance, patterns hidden in the noise of mortgage filings, search trends, and even changes in corporate executive travel schedules. But Oracle's real magic happened during live testing. As Rebecca fed it real-time data during the market turmoil of spring 2020, the algorithm didn't just predict general market trends, it identified specific opportunities with surgical precision. When everyone else was selling, Oracle spotted undervalued assets that would recover within weeks. When others were buying into apparent bargains, Oracle detected hidden vulnerabilities that would lead to further crashes. The results were staggering. In her controlled test environment, Oracle achieved returns that seemed almost too good to be true, consistently outperforming the market by margins that made even seasoned Wall Street veterans do double takes. Rebecca's presentation to the Ashford brothers was scheduled for a Friday afternoon in April. She'd prepared meticulously, creating detailed documentation of Oracle's methodology, performance metrics, and implementation timeline. She even had legal papers ready to formalize her intellectual property claims, a precaution her mentor at Stanford had insisted upon. The meeting lasted 4 hours. Rebecca walked the brothers through every aspect of Oracle, from its theoretical foundations to its practical applications. She demonstrated how the algorithm had successfully predicted 12 major market movements over the previous month, including the precise timing of Tesla's unexpected surge and the collapse of several pandemic-affected retail stocks. Cameron and Derek exchanged glances throughout the presentation, their excitement barely contained. By the end, they were talking about fast-tracking Oracle's integration into Nexus's platform and positioning the company for a massive Series B round that could value Nexus at over $1 billion. "This changes everything," Derek said, leaning back in his chair. "Rebecca, you've just made us all very wealthy." What Rebecca didn't know was that the Ashford brothers had been recording the entire presentation. While she focused on explaining Oracle's technical intricacies, they were mentally calculating how to extract maximum value from her creation while minimizing their dependence on her. The weekend after Rebecca's presentation, Cameron and Derek held a private meeting with their board of directors. The conversation, later revealed through court documents, focused on a single question: how could they own Oracle outright without sharing the massive profits they expected it to generate? Their lawyer, Thomas Whitfield from the prestigious firm Morrison & Associates, presented them with several options. The most elegant, he suggested, was to claim that Oracle constituted work for hire under Rebecca's employment contract, giving Nexus complete ownership of the intellectual property. To strengthen this position, they could document Oracle's development as a team effort, minimizing Rebecca's individual contributions. But there was a problem. Rebecca's employment contract contained a clause protecting her pre-existing research and any innovations that built substantially on her doctoral work. Oracle clearly fell into this category, which meant Rebecca retained ownership rights that could complicate Nexus's plans. Whitfield's solution was as ruthless as it was simple: create grounds for terminating Rebecca before she could formalize her IP claims, then proceed with Oracle's development using the technical knowledge they'd gained from her presentation. The plan required careful execution. They needed Rebecca to continue working on Oracle long enough to fully understand its implementation, but they had to remove her before she could secure legal protection for her intellectual property. Most importantly, they needed to document legitimate reasons for her termination that wouldn't expose their true motivations. Rebecca, meanwhile, was riding the highest wave of her professional life. The Monday after her presentation, she arrived at the office to find her access credentials had been upgraded and her project budget substantially increased. Cameron personally assigned her a team of 3 junior developers and promised that Oracle would become Nexus's flagship product. For the next 6 weeks, Rebecca worked with unprecedented resources and support. She refined Oracle's algorithms, built robust testing frameworks, and created comprehensive documentation of the system's architecture. The junior developers she supervised, Marcus Thompson, Lisa Chen, and David Rodriguez, were bright and eager, absorbing everything Rebecca taught them about pattern recognition and market analysis. What Rebecca interpreted as support was actually extraction. Every conversation she had with her team was carefully documented. Every technical decision was recorded and analyzed. The Ashford brothers were building a comprehensive record of Oracle's development that would allow them to recreate the system without her involvement. The end came swiftly and without warning. On June 15, 2020, Rebecca arrived at the office to find an HR representative waiting at her desk with a security guard. Her access badges had been deactivated, her company laptop was being confiscated, and she was being terminated effective immediately. The official reason, according to the termination letter handed to her by HR Director Patricia Williams, was violation of company policy regarding unauthorized external communications. The letter cited Rebecca's participation in a Stanford alumni podcast where she'd discussed algorithmic trading trends, an interview she'd cleared with her manager weeks earlier. Rebecca's requests to speak with Cameron or Derek were denied. Her attempts to access her files, including Oracle's source code and documentation, were blocked. Within 30 minutes of her arrival that morning, she was escorted from the building, carrying only her personal belongings in a small cardboard box. Standing on the sidewalk outside Nexus's gleaming office tower, Rebecca felt the full weight of what had just happened. 6 weeks of intensive work, months of preparation, and years of research had been ripped away from her in a single morning. But she had no idea that this was only the beginning of her story. Inside the building she'd just been forced to leave, the Ashford brothers were already meeting with Marcus, Lisa, and David. Oracle's development would continue without Rebecca, they explained. The 3 junior developers would be promoted and given significant equity stakes in exchange for their cooperation in completing the project Rebecca had started. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. None of them realized they were about to embark on the most catastrophic product launch in fintech history. Rebecca's first instinct was to call her lawyer, but she quickly discovered that her Stanford student loan payments had left her with barely enough savings to cover rent, let alone legal fees. The employment attorney she consulted during a free consultation delivered devastating news. Proving intellectual property theft would require extensive litigation that could cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, with no guarantee of success. Without documented proof that they're using your specific code or methodologies, Attorney Sarah Mitchell explained, you're looking at a David versus Goliath situation. These cases can drag on for years, and Nexus has deep pockets for legal defense. Rebecca spent the following weeks in a haze of anger and disbelief. She applied for unemployment benefits, updated her resume, and started reaching out to her network for job opportunities. But every conversation felt hollow. How could she explain to potential employers that she'd developed a revolutionary trading algorithm, only to have it stolen by her previous company? Meanwhile, inside Nexus, the Ashford brothers were discovering that replacing Rebecca wouldn't be as straightforward as they'd anticipated. Marcus Thompson, the most senior of the 3 developers who'd worked with her, tried to implement Oracle's core functionality, but kept running into technical barriers that Rebecca had solved months earlier. The pattern recognition module is throwing errors every time we feed it real-time data, Marcus reported during a tense meeting in July. Rebecca had mentioned something about recursive filtering, but I don't have her specific implementation notes. Derek's response was typically blunt. Figure it out. We're announcing Oracle to investors next month. The pressure on Marcus, Lisa, and David intensified as the deadline approached. They worked 18-hour days trying to reverse engineer Rebecca's work, but they were missing crucial pieces of the puzzle. Rebecca had been careful about certain proprietary elements of her algorithm, keeping some of the most sophisticated components in her head rather than in documented code. By August, it became clear that the three developers couldn't fully recreate Oracle's performance. The algorithm they'd built produced results that were impressive by industry standards but fell far short of the miraculous returns Rebecca had demonstrated. Cameron made a fateful decision. They would enhance their version with additional features and market it as Oracle 2.0, claiming it was an evolution of Rebecca's original work. This decision introduced a critical flaw into their system. In trying to improve upon Rebecca's design, they fundamentally misunderstood how her pattern recognition worked. Rebecca's algorithm succeeded because it knew its limitations. It made fewer trades but with much higher accuracy. The Ashford brothers version tried to be more aggressive, making more frequent trades to compensate for its lower accuracy rate. While Nexus struggled with their stolen algorithm, Rebecca was facing her own crisis. After 3 months of job searching, she'd received multiple offers but none felt right. Traditional finance roles seemed boring after working on Oracle, and other fintech startups couldn't offer the resources or vision she needed to do meaningful work. The breakthrough came through an unexpected source. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, Rebecca's former dissertation advisor at Stanford, reached out with an unusual proposition. A family office representing several ultra-high net worth individuals was looking for someone to develop a proprietary trading system. The compensation was modest, but they were offering something more valuable: complete intellectual property ownership and unlimited research freedom. They're not looking for another robo-advisor, Dr. Walsh explained during their coffee meeting in Palo Alto. They want someone who can think differently about markets. Sound familiar? The Pemberton family office managed assets for tech billionaires who'd made their fortunes during the dot-com boom and later cycles. Unlike traditional investment firms focused on quarterly returns, they thought in decades. This long-term perspective appealed to Rebecca, who'd always believed that true market innovation required patience and deep research. Rebecca's new position allowed her to start fresh with Oracle's concepts while developing entirely new approaches. Working from a small but well-equipped office in Menlo Park, she began building what she privately called Oracle Genesis, a system that incorporated everything she'd learned from her original algorithm while exploring new frontiers in market prediction. The key innovation came from Rebecca's realization that her original Oracle had been too narrow in scope. Financial markets didn't exist in isolation. They were influenced by everything from weather patterns affecting agricultural commodities to social media trends driving consumer behavior. Oracle Genesis would analyze these broader patterns to identify investment opportunities that other systems missed entirely. Meanwhile, Nexus was preparing for its Series B funding round. The Ashford brothers had lined up meetings with several prominent venture capital firms, and their pitch centered entirely on Oracle's revolutionary capabilities. They'd created impressive marketing materials showcasing the algorithm's performance, carefully omitting any mention of Rebecca's role in its development. The first sign of trouble came during a demonstration for Peninsula Ventures, one of Silicon Valley's most respected VC firms. Partner Michael Steinberg had agreed to observe Oracle's live trading for 2 weeks before making his investment decision. Cameron and Derek were confident. Their version of Oracle had been performing well in controlled testing environments. But live market conditions exposed the fatal flaws in their implementation. During the first week of observation, Oracle 2.0 made a series of aggressive trades that generated impressive short-term returns. Steinberg was intrigued, but he wanted to see how the system performed during market volatility. He didn't have to wait long. On September 2nd, unexpected news broke about potential changes to Federal Reserve interest rate policy. Rebecca's original Oracle would have detected the early warning signals and positioned itself defensively. The Ashford brothers version, programmed to be more aggressive, doubled down on positions that were about to become extremely costly. Within 6 hours, Oracle 2.0 had lost 12% of the test portfolio's value. Traditional trading algorithms might lose that much during a major market crash, but this happened during what most analysts considered minor market turbulence. "I'm concerned about the risk management protocols," Steinberg told Cameron during their post-mortem meeting. "Your system seems to amplify volatility rather than managing it." The Ashford brothers assured him this was an anomaly, but privately they knew they had a serious problem. Marcus and his team worked frantically to adjust Oracle's parameters, but every modification seemed to create new issues. The algorithm that was supposed to revolutionize trading was becoming increasingly unstable. Rebecca, meanwhile, was making steady progress with Oracle Genesis. Her new approach was yielding remarkable results, not the flashy, unsustainable returns that venture capitalists loved, but consistent, superior performance that impressed her sophisticated clients at the IC, Pemberton family office. More importantly, Rebecca was building something that went beyond algorithmic trading. Oracle Genesis was becoming a comprehensive market intelligence system that could identify long-term trends and opportunities across multiple asset classes. Her clients weren't just making money, they were gaining insights that allowed them to make strategic decisions about business investments, real estate acquisitions, and philanthropic initiatives. The Pemberton family office's assets under Rebecca's management grew from $50 million to over $200 million within 6 months. Word began spreading through Silicon Valley's exclusive circles about a mysterious algorithm that was generating extraordinary returns for a select group of investors. Back at Nexus, the pressure was mounting. The Series B round had been delayed twice as potential investors raised questions about Oracle's performance. The Ashford brothers realized they needed a dramatic demonstration to restore confidence in their technology. Derek proposed a bold strategy. They would launch Oracle as a public-facing product, allowing retail investors to access the same technology that they claimed institutional investors were clamoring to use. This would generate immediate revenue, prove Oracle's scalability, and create the momentum needed to complete their funding round. Cameron was initially hesitant. What if Oracle performs poorly with public money? The regulatory scrutiny alone could kill us. It won't perform poorly, Derek insisted. We'll limit the initial launch to conservative strategies and gradually expand as we optimize the system. This decision would prove to be the most catastrophic mistake in Nexus's short history. They were about to put their flawed, unstable algorithm in front of thousands of retail investors who trusted them with their life savings. The public launch was scheduled for January 15, 2021. The Ashford brothers spent the final months of 2020 building marketing campaigns around Oracle's revolutionary capabilities, recruiting high-profile endorsements, and preparing their technical infrastructure for what they expected would be massive demand. Rebecca learned about Nexus's plans through industry newsletters and social media buzz. Seeing her stolen work being promoted as Nexus's breakthrough, innovation filled her with a complex mixture of anger and anticipation. She knew better than anyone else how dangerous their implementation could be in the hands of ordinary investors. As January approached, Rebecca made a decision that would change everything. She would not actively sabotage Nexus. She didn't need to. The flawed algorithm they'd built would destroy itself, and she would be ready to document every moment of the collapse. The marketing blitz for Nexus's public launch of Oracle began in earnest during the first week of January 2021. Cameron Ashford appeared on CNBC's Squawk Box, confidently declaring that Oracle would democratize institutional-grade trading intelligence for everyday investors. Derek followed with interviews on Bloomberg and Financial Times, positioning Nexus as the company that would finally level the playing field between Wall Street and Main Street. Their messaging was compelling. For decades, sophisticated algorithmic trading had been reserved for hedge funds and investment banks. Now, through Oracle, ordinary investors could access the same predictive capabilities that generated billions in profits for financial institutions. The initial pricing was aggressive, just $90 per month for unlimited access to Oracle's recommendations. Pre-registration opened on January 8th, and the response exceeded even the Ashford brothers' optimistic projections. Within 48 hours, over 15,000 potential users had signed up for early access. Financial influencers on YouTube and TikTok began promoting Oracle as a revolutionary tool that could help their followers achieve financial independence. Behind the scenes, Marcus Thompson and his development team were working around the clock to prepare Oracle's infrastructure for the anticipated surge in users. They'd built a sleek mobile app and web platform that presented the algorithm's recommendations in easy-to-understand formats, complete with risk ratings and performance projections. What they hadn't adequately tested was how Oracle would perform when making simultaneous recommendations for thousands of users during volatile market conditions. The algorithm had been designed for institutional-scale portfolios, where a single recommendation might involve millions of dollars in trades. Scaling this down to handle thousands of small individual investments introduced computational complexities that Marcus's team didn't fully understand. Rebecca monitored Nexus's launch preparations with professional detachment. Through her connections in Silicon Valley's tight-knit financial technology community, she'd learned details about Oracle's architecture that confirmed her suspicions about its fundamental flaws. The system was essentially making the same mistakes she'd identified and corrected in her original research, amplified by the Ashford brothers' misguided attempt to make it more aggressive. On January 14th, the day before Oracle's official launch, Rebecca received an unexpected phone call from Jessica Martinez, a financial journalist at TechCrunch who was investigating Nexus's technology claims. "I've been digging into Oracle's development history," Jessica explained. "Several sources have mentioned that a former Nexus employee was instrumental in creating the core algorithm. Would you be willing to speak on the record about your experience there?" Rebecca declined the interview, but the conversation confirmed that she wasn't the only person with questions about Nexus's intellectual property claims. The tech journalism community was starting to scrutinize the company's rapid rise and bold technological assertions. January 15, 2021, began with tremendous excitement at Nexus headquarters. The Ashford brothers arrived early to personally oversee Oracle's launch, surrounded by their marketing team and a photographer documenting what they expected would be a historic moment in fintech innovation. At 9:30 a.m. Eastern Time, Oracle went live to its first 1,000 beta users. The timing was intentionally coordinated with the opening of financial markets, allowing new users to immediately see Oracle's recommendations in action. The initial response was overwhelmingly positive. Oracle's user interface was polished and intuitive. Its recommendations were clearly explained, and early users appreciated the detailed risk assessments accompanying each suggestion. Social media lit up with screenshots of Oracle's predictions and enthusiastic testimonials from satisfied customers. For the first 3 hours, everything proceeded exactly as the Ashford brothers had envisioned. Oracle generated dozens of trading recommendations across various asset classes, and users reported strong performance from the positions they'd taken based on the algorithm's guidance. The problems began at 12:45 p.m., when unexpected news broke about a potential corporate merger that would significantly impact several technology stocks. This type of surprise announcement was exactly the scenario where Rebecca's original Oracle algorithm had excelled. It would have detected early warning signals and positioned users to benefit from the volatility. Nexus's version of Oracle reacted differently. Instead of recognizing the merger announcement as an opportunity for careful strategic positioning, the algorithm interpreted the market movement as confirmation of its existing bullish predictions on technology stocks. It doubled down on recommendations that were about to become extremely costly. Within minutes, Oracle was advising its users to increase their positions in several stocks that were about to decline sharply as the market digested the merger's implications. for competitive dynamics in the tech sector. Users who followed these recommendations watched their portfolios lose value rapidly as the afternoon progressed. Marcus Thompson watched the disaster unfold from Nexus's trading floor, where wall-mounted monitors displayed real-time performance metrics for Oracle's recommendations. The algorithm's success rate, which had maintained a respectable 73% accuracy during testing, plummeted to below 40% within 2 hours. "We need to shut down new recommendations until we can analyze what's happening," Marcus told Cameron urgently. "Absolutely not," Cameron replied. "This is just normal market volatility. Oracle will adapt and recover, but Oracle didn't adapt." The flaws in its risk management protocols became more pronounced as market conditions grew more complex throughout the afternoon. The algorithm began generating contradictory recommendations, suggesting users buy and sell similar assets simultaneously. Its confidence scores became wildly inaccurate, rating high-risk positions as conservative investments. By 4 p.m., when markets closed, Oracle's first-day performance was catastrophic. Users who had followed the algorithm's recommendations experienced average losses of 18%, while the broader market declined by less than 2%. The Nexus customer service team was overwhelmed with angry calls from users demanding explanations and refunds. The Ashford brothers held an emergency meeting with their core team that evening. The mood was tense as they tried to understand what had gone wrong and how to prevent similar disasters in the future. "The algorithm performed perfectly during our testing phases," Derek insisted. "There must be external factors we didn't account for." Lisa Chen, one of the original developers who'd worked with Rebecca, finally spoke up with concerns she'd been harboring for months. "I think we misunderstood some of Rebecca's original design principles. Her algorithm was much more conservative. In its approach, it made fewer trades but with higher accuracy. We've been pushing for more frequent recommendations to justify the subscription model." This admission hung in the air like a toxic cloud. For the first time since Rebecca's termination, the Ashford brothers were forced to confront the possibility that they'd fundamentally misunderstood the technology they'd stolen. Meanwhile, Rebecca was experiencing the most successful day in her professional career. Oracle Genesis had predicted the merger announcement 3 days in advance, positioning her clients to profit substantially from the market volatility that had destroyed Nexus's users. The Pemberton family office's portfolio gained 12%, while most investors suffered losses. Word of Oracle Genesis's performance spread quickly through Silicon Valley's investment community. Rebecca received calls from 3 different venture capital firms interested in funding her to build a commercial version of her system. After months of struggling with the aftermath of her termination, she was suddenly in a position of strength. The next morning brought a flood of negative coverage for Nexus. Financial bloggers dissected Oracle's disastrous debut. Technology journalists questioned the company's algorithmic claims, and regulatory authorities began inquiring about consumer protection issues related to the platform's marketing promises. The most damaging article appeared in the Wall Street Journal, written by veteran finance reporter Amanda Chen. Her investigation revealed that several former Nexus employees had raised concerns about Oracle's development process and questioned whether the company possessed the technical expertise to deliver on its ambitious promises. Multiple sources familiar with Nexus's technology development suggest that the company's flagship Oracle algorithm was originally developed by a former employee who was terminated months before the public launch, Chen wrote. These sources indicate that Nexus may have struggled to fully replicate the original algorithm's capabilities. The article didn't mention Rebecca by name, but it painted a devastating picture of a company that had overpromised and underdelivered on its core technology offering. More importantly, it raised questions about intellectual property issues that could complicate Nexus's funding efforts and regulatory standing. Cameron and Derek's response to the negative coverage was to double down on their marketing claims. They published a blog post defending Oracle's performance and blaming external market conditions for the poor results. They announced plans to enhance the algorithm based on user feedback and promised improved performance in future market conditions. But the damage was already spreading beyond negative press coverage. Class action attorneys began investigating potential lawsuits from Oracle users who had suffered significant losses. Financial regulators started examining whether Nexus's marketing claims constituted misleading advertising. Most critically, the venture capital firms that had been considering investing in Nexus's Series B round began distancing themselves from the company. Rebecca watched these developments with a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. She felt vindicated seeing the flaws in Nexus's implementation exposed so dramatically, but she also recognized that thousands of ordinary investors had suffered real financial harm because of the Ashford brothers' decisions. The worst was yet to come. Oracle's second week of operation would prove even more disastrous than its debut, as the algorithm's fundamental instabilities became increasingly apparent under continued market pressure. Oracle's second week of operation began with what the Ashford brothers hoped would be a redemption story. They'd spent the weekend implementing emergency patches to the algorithm, adjusting its risk parameters, and adding new safeguards designed to prevent the catastrophic recommendations that had plagued its debut. Marcus Thompson and his team had worked continuously for 72 hours, fueled by caffeine and desperation. They'd identified what they believed were the core issues. The algorithm was processing too much data simultaneously, creating feedback loops that amplified minor market signals into major trading recommendations. Their solution involved adding filtering mechanisms to reduce the system's sensitivity to short-term volatility. But their fixes addressed symptoms rather than root causes. The fundamental problem with their version of Oracle wasn't its sensitivity, it was its complete misunderstanding of how market patterns actually worked. Rebecca's original algorithm succeeded because it recognized that most market movements were noise, not signal. The Ashford brothers' version tried to find profitable patterns in every piece of data it processed. Monday morning brought fresh challenges that would test their modified algorithm in ways they hadn't anticipated. The Federal Reserve was scheduled to release employment data at 8:30 a.m., followed by a speech from Fed Chair Jerome Powell at 2 p.m. These events typically created significant market volatility, making it an ideal test case for Oracle's improved risk management. Rebecca, monitoring the situation from her office at the Pemberton family office, recognized the day's potential immediately. Oracle Genesis had been tracking employment trends for weeks, analyzing everything from job posting, data to unemployment claims to predict how the official numbers would surprise markets. Her algorithm suggested that the employment report would show stronger than expected job growth, likely triggering concerns about inflation and potential interest rate changes. Based on this analysis, Oracle Genesis positioned its clients defensively, reducing exposure to interest rate-sensitive sectors while increasing positions in companies that typically benefited from strong employment growth. The strategy was conservative, but sophisticated, exactly the approach that had made Rebecca's original algorithm so successful. Nexus's Oracle took a dramatically different approach. The modified algorithm interpreted pre-market trading patterns as signals that the employment report would be disappointing, leading to recommendations that users increase their positions in growth stocks that typically performed well during periods of economic uncertainty. When the employment data was released at 8:30 a.m., it showed the strongest job growth in 6 months, exactly as Oracle Genesis had predicted. Markets reacted swiftly, with interest rates rising and growth stocks declining as investors repositioned for a potentially more hawkish Federal Reserve. Oracle's users, following the algorithm's morning recommendations, found themselves on the wrong side of these moves. The system had advised them to buy technology stocks just hours before a sector-wide sell-off that would persist for the remainder of the week. But the real disaster was yet to come. Oracle's risk management systems, designed to prevent large losses, began triggering automatically as the algorithm's recommendations moved against its users. Instead of cutting losses early, the system interpreted the decline as a buying opportunity, generating additional recommendations for users to average down their positions. This created a devastating feedback loop. As more users followed Oracle's advice to increase their positions in declining stocks, their losses mounted exponentially. The algorithm's confidence ratings remained high, suggesting to users that the system was identifying temporary market dislocations rather than fundamental shifts in sentiment. By noon, Oracle's average user had lost 27% of their portfolio value in less than 4 hours. The Nexus customer service team was receiving over 100 calls per minute from panicked users demanding immediate assistance. The company's social media accounts were flooded with complaints, screenshots of massive losses, and threats of legal action. Cameron Ashford watched the carnage unfold from his office, periodically checking Oracle's performance metrics on his laptop while pretending to work on other projects. The numbers were undeniable. Their algorithm wasn't just performing poorly, it was actively destroying their users' wealth at an unprecedented rate. "We need to shut it down," Marcus told him during an emergency meeting. "The algorithm is broken. Every recommendation it makes is amplifying losses instead of preventing them." "We can't shut down," Derek replied. "We have over 20,000 active users now. Shutting down Oracle would be admitting complete failure." Their decision to keep Oracle running despite its obvious malfunctions would later be cited by regulators as evidence of willful negligence. The Ashford brothers were prioritizing their company's reputation over their users' financial well-being, a choice that would have severe legal consequences. Meanwhile, word of Oracle's catastrophic performance was spreading throughout Silicon Valley's investment community. Rebecca received a call from Dr. Jennifer Walsh, who had been following the situation with professional interest. "Your former employer is imploding spectacularly," Dr. Walsh observed. "I'm hearing from colleagues at other firms that Oracle is being used as a cautionary tale about algorithmic trading gone wrong." Rebecca felt a complex mix of emotions hearing this news. She was vindicated in her understanding of the algorithm's proper implementation, but she also recognized that Nexus's failure was damaging the broader perception of algorithmic trading technology. Years of legitimate research were being overshadowed by one company's spectacular mismanagement. The afternoon brought Jerome Powell's speech, which Oracle Genesis had correctly predicted would signal the Federal Reserve's concern about inflation risks. Rebecca's clients were positioned to benefit from the hawkish tone, with portfolios that gained value as interest rates rose and financial sector stocks outperformed. Oracle's response to the Fed chair's speech was characteristically disastrous. The algorithm interpreted Powell's comments as confirmation that the morning's employment data had been misunderstood by markets, leading to recommendations that users double down on their losing positions in growth stocks. Users who had already lost significant money following Oracle's morning advice were now being told to risk even more capital on the same failing strategy. The algorithm's confidence ratings remained artificially high, suggesting to users that a market recovery was imminent. By market close, Oracle's users had experienced average losses of 38% over 2 days of operation. No legitimate trading system had ever produced such consistently negative results during normal market conditions. The algorithm had become a remarkably efficient wealth destruction machine. The evening brought a flood of media coverage that would define Nexus's legacy in Silicon Valley. TechCrunch published an investigative piece titled "The Oracle Disaster: How a FinTech Startup Lost Millions of User Dollars in 48 Hours." The article detailed specific examples of Oracle's failed recommendations and included interviews with affected users who had lost their life savings following the algorithm's advice. One particularly heartbreaking case involved Elena Rodriguez, a 34-year-old teacher from Oakland who had invested her entire retirement account based on Oracle's recommendations. She'd lost $47,000 in 2 days, money she'd spent 15 years saving for her children's college educations. I trusted them because they said it was institutional-grade technology, Elena told TechCrunch. I thought I was finally getting access to the same tools that rich people use to make money. Instead, I lost everything. Stories like Elena's began appearing across financial media, creating a public relations catastrophe for Nexus that extended far beyond their immediate business concerns. The company wasn't just failing, it was causing real harm to ordinary people who had trusted their marketing promises. The Ashford brothers spent Tuesday evening in crisis management mode, consulting with their lawyers and public relations firm about damage control strategies. Their primary concern wasn't fixing Oracle's technical problems. It was preventing the mounting criticism from derailing their Series B funding round. We need to frame this as a temporary setback caused by extraordinary market conditions, their ZEU PR consultant advised. Emphasize that algorithmic trading always involves risk, and that Oracle's long-term performance will vindicate the technology. But behind closed doors, the brothers were beginning to understand the magnitude of their situation. They'd built their entire company around a technology they didn't fully understand, marketed it to consumers who trusted their expertise, and were now facing potential legal and regulatory consequences that could destroy not just Nexus, but their personal careers and finances. The worst part was that they knew Rebecca Martinez had built something genuinely revolutionary. They'd seen her original algorithm's performance, witnessed its sophisticated understanding of market dynamics, and recognized its potential to transform investing. Their greed and short-sightedness had turned that potential into a disaster that would haunt them for years to come. As Tuesday night turned into Wednesday morning, both brothers lay awake wondering if they'd destroyed their company, their users' trust, and their own futures in pursuit of profits they'd never been qualified to generate. Wednesday morning brought news that would transform Rebecca's quiet vindication into a very public reckoning. At 6:47 a.m. Pacific Time, financial blogger Harrison Webb published a bombshell investigation on his widely read platform, Silicon Valley Decoded. The article, titled "The Real Creator of Oracle: How Nexus Built a Billion-Dollar Valuation on Stolen Code," named Rebecca Martinez as the original developer of the algorithm that Nexus had catastrophically misimplemented. Webb's investigation was thorough and damning. He'd obtained copies of Rebecca's original research papers, interviewed former Stanford colleagues familiar with her work, and spoken with 3 anonymous sources inside Nexus, who confirmed that Oracle was based on Rebecca's proprietary methodology. Most devastatingly, he'd acquired email evidence showing that the Ashford brothers had deliberately recorded Rebecca's technical presentations and used them to guide their development efforts after her termination. Martinez's original algorithm was a sophisticated piece of financial engineering that required deep understanding of market microstructure and behavioral economics, Webb wrote. The version deployed by Nexus appears to be a crude approximation that retained the complexity while abandoning the safeguards that made the original system successful. The article went viral within hours, shared across LinkedIn, Twitter, and Reddit by users eager to understand how Oracle's disaster had unfolded. Financial professionals who had been puzzled by Nexus's bold technological claims suddenly had context for the company's spectacular failure. Rebecca learned about the article through a text message from Dr. Walsh, who sent her the link with a simple note: "The truth is finally coming out." Reading Webb's investigation from her kitchen table, Rebecca felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. She'd been vindicated, but she also knew that public attention would bring complications she wasn't prepared to handle. Her phone began ringing almost immediately. Reporters from the Wall Street Journal, Financial Times, and Bloomberg were calling for interviews. Lawyers representing Oracle's victims wanted to discuss potential testimony. Venture capitalists who had been following her work at the Pemberton family office were suddenly eager to meet about funding opportunities. At Nexus headquarters, the mood was funeral quiet. Webb's article had arrived like a precision-guided missile, destroying any remaining credibility the Ashford brothers might have retained after Oracle's operational disasters. Their Series B investors had read the investigation and were demanding emergency meetings to discuss the funding round's future. "This changes everything," Peninsula Ventures' Michael Steinberg told Cameron during a tense phone call. "We can't invest in a company built on allegedly stolen intellectual property. The legal risks alone would be prohibitive." One by one, Nexus's potential investors withdrew from the Series B round. The funding that had been nearly guaranteed just weeks earlier evaporated as the scandal engulfed the company's reputation. Without fresh capital, Nexus would be unable to meet its operational expenses beyond the end of February. But the Ashford brothers' problems extended far beyond funding difficulties. The Securities and Exchange Commission announced that it was opening a formal investigation into Nexus's marketing claims and operational practices. The California Department of Financial Protection and Innovation followed with its own inquiry, focusing specifically on whether the company had violated consumer protection laws by misrepresenting Oracle's capabilities. Most ominously, a class action lawsuit was filed in San Francisco Superior Court on behalf of Oracle's users. The complaint, filed by prominent securities attorney Patricia Hoffman, alleged that Nexus had engaged in fraudulent misrepresentation by marketing an algorithm they knew to be fundamentally flawed. The lawsuit sought damages for all financial losses suffered by Oracle users, potentially totaling tens of millions of dollars. Rebecca found herself at the center of a legal storm she hadn't anticipated. Hoffman's firm contacted her within hours of filing the lawsuit, requesting her cooperation as a potential expert witness. The SEC's investigation team reached out seeking information about her original research and her experience at Nexus. "You're going to be central to this case," attorney Sarah Mitchell explained during an emergency consultation. "Your original work proves that a functional version of Oracle was possible, which supports claims that Nexus either knew their version was flawed or was negligent in its implementation." Rebecca realized she faced a difficult decision. Cooperating with the investigations would provide justice for Oracle's victims and potentially result in significant financial compensation for her stolen intellectual property. But it would also thrust her into a prolonged legal battle against well-funded opponents who had already demonstrated their willingness to act ruthlessly. Meanwhile, Oracle continued operating despite its proven track record of destroying user wealth. The Ashford brothers had decided that shutting down the platform would constitute an admission of guilt that could worsen their legal position. Instead, they published increasingly desperate blog posts claiming that Oracle's poor performance was temporary and that improvements were being implemented continuously. This decision proved to be another catastrophic miscalculation. Oracle's third week of operation was even worse than the first two, as the algorithm's flawed risk management systems began generating increasingly erratic recommendations. Users who had remained loyal despite their initial losses found themselves facing even steeper declines as Oracle advised them to chase momentum in rapidly declining stocks. The breaking point came on Friday, January 29th, when Oracle recommended that users invest heavily in GameStop stock during the height of the Reddit-driven short squeeze. The algorithm interpreted the stock's volatile price movements as a signal that institutional investors were repositioning their portfolios, leading to recommendations that users buy GameStop at prices that would prove to be near the peak of its speculative bubble. When GameStop's price collapsed the following week, Oracle users who had followed this advice suffered losses that pushed many of them below 50% of their original portfolio values. The algorithm had managed to position its users on the wrong side of one of the most dramatic market events in recent history. The GameStop disaster finally forced regulatory intervention. The SEC issued an emergency order requiring Nexus to suspend Oracle's operations pending a full investigation of the platform's algorithmic processes and risk management procedures. The California Department of Financial Protection and Innovation followed with its own suspension order, effectively shutting down Oracle's operations in the state where most of its users resided. Rebecca watched these developments with professional fascination and personal satisfaction. The regulatory shutdown vindicated her understanding that Nexus's version of Oracle was fundamentally dangerous, not just ineffective. Government agencies that rarely intervened in algorithmic trading had determined that the platform posed such significant risks to consumer welfare that it required immediate suspension. The final blow to Nexus came from an unexpected source. Marcus Thompson, the lead developer who had struggled to recreate Rebecca's work, decided to become a whistleblower. Facing potential personal liability for his role in Oracle's development, he provided federal investigators with detailed documentation of how the Ashford brothers had stolen Rebecca's methodology and then ignored warnings about the algorithm's instability. Thompson's evidence included email chains showing that he had repeatedly raised concerns about Oracle's risk management protocols, only to be overruled by the brothers who were focused on meeting launch deadlines and fundraising targets. Most damaging was his testimony that Derek Ashford had explicitly instructed the development team to make Oracle more aggressive to generate higher returns, despite warnings that this approach violated core principles of Rebecca's original design. By February 15, 2021, exactly 1 month after Oracle's launch, Nexus Financial Technologies was effectively dead. The company had burned through its remaining cash defending against multiple lawsuits and regulatory investigations. The Ashford brothers had been forced to lay off their entire staff and were facing personal bankruptcy as their assets were frozen pending resolution of the various legal proceedings against them. Rebecca, meanwhile, was experiencing the most successful period of her career. Oracle Genesis had generated consistent positive returns throughout the market volatility that had destroyed Oracle's users. Her reputation in Silicon Valley's investment community was stronger than ever, and she was fielding offers from multiple venture capital firms eager to fund a commercial version of her technology. The contrast couldn't have been more stark. The thieves who had stolen her work were facing professional and financial ruin, while she was being courted by the same investors who had once overlooked her capabilities. Justice, it seemed, had a sense of poetic irony. The class action settlement negotiations began in March 2021, conducted in a sterile conference room on the 42nd floor of a downtown San Francisco law firm. Rebecca sat across from Cameron and Derek Ashford for the first time since her termination 9 months earlier. The brothers looked haggard and defeated, their usual polished confidence replaced by the hollow stare of men who had lost everything. Rebecca's role in the settlement was unprecedented. She wasn't just a witness, she was the key to resolving the entire case. Her willingness to share Oracle Genesis's methodology with court-appointed experts had proven definitively that the Ashford brothers possessed the knowledge necessary to build a functional trading algorithm. Their failure to do so constituted gross negligence that made them liable for all user losses. Ms. Martinez holds all the cards here, explained Patricia Hoffman, the lead attorney representing Oracle's victims. Her cooperation has established that your clients knew, or should have known, that their implementation was fundamentally flawed. The settlement terms were harsh, but fair. Nexus would pay $47 million to compensate Oracle users for their losses, money that would come primarily from the brothers' personal assets and insurance policies. Additionally, Cameron and Derek would be permanently banned from serving as executives in any financial services company, effectively ending their careers in fintech. But the most significant aspect of the settlement involved Rebecca's intellectual property rights. The court formally recognized her as Oracle's original creator and awarded her full ownership of all related patents and methodologies. This meant that any future development of similar algorithmic trading systems would require her permission and likely involve substantial licensing fees. Rebecca's decision to accept the settlement wasn't driven by revenge. It was motivated by her desire to see Oracle's victims made whole and to establish legal precedent protecting innovators from intellectual property theft. The monetary compensation she received was substantial, but more important was the vindication of her work and the prevention of future exploitation. The Ashford brothers' personal reckonings came swiftly after the settlement. Cameron declared bankruptcy within weeks, his Palo Alto mansion and luxury car collection seized to satisfy creditor claims. Derek's situation was even worse. He faced potential criminal charges for securities fraud, as federal prosecutors examined whether his public statements about Oracle constituted intentional deception of investors and consumers. Marcus Thompson, whose whistleblower testimony had been crucial to the case, received immunity from prosecution and a substantial financial reward from the SEC's whistleblower program. His cooperation had not only exposed the truth about Oracle's development, but also provided regulators with detailed evidence of how financial technology companies could manipulate algorithmic systems to mislead consumers. What Nexus did represents everything wrong with Silicon Valley's move fast and break things mentality, Thompson told reporters after the settlement was announced. When you're breaking things with people's life savings, the consequences become very real very quickly. The regulatory aftermath extended far beyond Nexus. The SEC used the case to establish new guidelines for algorithmic trading platforms marketed to retail investors. Companies would now be required to provide detailed performance disclosures, undergo regular third-party audits of their trading systems, and maintain insurance policies sufficient to cover potential user losses. Rebecca's vindication opened doors she had never imagined possible. Oracle Genesis's performance during the Nexus crisis had attracted attention from sovereign wealth funds, pension systems, and family offices managing billions in assets. She was no longer just a talented developer. She had become one of the most sought-after algorithmic trading experts in the world. The Pemberton family office, recognizing Rebecca's increased market value, restructured their arrangement to make her a full partner rather than an employee. This new partnership gave Rebecca complete ownership of Oracle Genesis, while providing her with the resources necessary to expand its capabilities and reach. But Rebecca's most satisfying project came from an unexpected source. Elena Rodriguez, the Oakland teacher who had lost her retirement savings following Oracle's advice, reached out through the settlement administrator with a unique request. She wanted Rebecca's help developing a financial literacy program that would teach ordinary investors how to evaluate algorithmic trading claims and protect themselves from predatory fintech companies. "I don't want what happened to me to happen to other people," Elena explained during their first meeting. "If there's a way to use your knowledge to educate people about these risks, I think we owe it to future investors to try." Rebecca agreed. Immediately, working with Elena and several other Oracle victims, she developed a comprehensive curriculum covering algorithmic trading, risk management, and the warning signs of potentially fraudulent investment platforms. The program, offered free through community colleges and adult education centers, became a model for investor protection education nationwide. The criminal investigation into Derek Ashford's conduct concluded in September 2021 with a federal indictment on charges of securities fraud and wire fraud. The prosecution alleged that Derek had knowingly made false statements about Oracle's capabilities to investors and consumers, despite internal evidence showing that the algorithm was fundamentally flawed. Derek's trial became a cautionary tale about the intersection of technology and financial regulation. Former Nexus employees testified about internal warnings that had been ignored. Investors described misleading presentations they had received, and Oracle users shared heartbreaking stories about losing their life savings based on the company's promises. Rebecca's testimony was the prosecution's centerpiece. Over 3 days on the witness stand, she methodically explained how her original algorithm worked, identified the specific flaws in Nexus's implementation, and demonstrated that any competent developer should have recognized these problems before launching the platform. "The defendants didn't just steal my intellectual property," Rebecca told the jury during her final day of testimony. "They took something that was designed to help people make better financial decisions and turned it into a weapon that destroyed those same people's financial security. Derek was convicted on all charges and sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. Cameron, who had cooperated with prosecutors in exchange for a plea agreement, received 3 years of probation and was required to perform community service educating other entrepreneurs about intellectual property law and fiduciary responsibility. By late 2021, Rebecca had transformed Oracle Genesis into a comprehensive financial intelligence platform serving institutional clients worldwide. Her company, Martinez Analytics, employed over 50 developers, researchers, and financial engineers working on cutting-edge applications of machine learning to investment management. But Rebecca's proudest achievement remained the investor education program she had developed with Elena Rodriguez. The curriculum had been adopted by over 200 educational institutions and had reached thousands of individual investors. Anonymous surveys suggested that program participants were significantly better at identifying potentially fraudulent investment opportunities and avoiding predatory financial products. The Nexus story became required reading in business schools and ethics courses, studied as an example of how intellectual property theft, combined with technological incompetence and regulatory negligence, could create devastating consequences for ordinary consumers. Rebecca was frequently invited to speak at conferences and universities, sharing her experience as both a cautionary tale and an inspiration for ethical innovation. 5 years later, as Rebecca stood before a packed auditorium at Stanford, delivering the keynote address for the university's annual FinTech conference, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. The algorithm that had started as doctoral research had evolved into a multi-billion-dollar enterprise that was genuinely improving how institutions managed risk and generated returns. But the real victory wasn't financial or professional. It was the knowledge that she had protected future innovators from experiencing the theft and betrayal she had endured. The legal precedents established through her case, the educational programs she had developed, and the regulatory changes her experience had inspired would benefit countless entrepreneurs and investors for generations to come. The theft of her algorithm had been intended to destroy her career and enrich her betrayers. Instead, it had become the foundation for building something far more valuable than either side had originally imagined, a more ethical and transparent financial technology industry that truly served the people it claimed to help. Rebecca Martinez had not just survived corporate betrayal, she had transformed it into a force for positive change that would outlast any individual company or algorithm. That, perhaps, was the most elegant form of justice possible. 3 years after Derek Ashford began serving his federal prison sentence, Rebecca Martinez received an unexpected letter. Written on standard prison stationery and careful handwriting, it was a personal apology from the man who had orchestrated the theft of her life's work. "I know this letter can't undo the damage I caused," Derek wrote. "But I wanted you to know that I've spent every day of the last 3 years thinking about the people we hurt. I was so focused on building a billion-dollar company that I forgot we were playing with real people's money and dreams." Rebecca read the letter twice before filing it away. She had long since moved beyond anger toward Derek and Cameron, but the apology provided an unexpected sense of closure. The man who had once viewed her as an obstacle to his ambitions now understood the human cost of his choices. The letter arrived during a particularly meaningful week for Rebecca. Martinez Analytics was preparing to announce its acquisition by Goldman Sachs for $2.8 billion, a deal that would make Rebecca one of the youngest billionaires in fintech history. But more importantly, the acquisition would give her access to Goldman's global distribution network, allowing Oracle Genesis to serve millions of investors worldwide. The irony wasn't lost on her. The algorithm that Nexus had stolen and corrupted would now power investment decisions for one of Wall Street's most prestigious institutions. Rebecca's insistence on maintaining Oracle Genesis's conservative, risk-conscious design philosophy had made it exactly the kind of stable, reliable system that major financial institutions required. During the acquisition negotiations, Goldman's due diligence team had been particularly impressed by Oracle Genesis's performance during periods of market stress. While other algorithmic trading systems suffered during the COVID-19 crash, the GameStop volatility, and various geopolitical crises, Rebecca's algorithm had consistently protected capital while identifying genuine opportunities. What Rebecca built is fundamentally different from every other system we've evaluated, explained Goldman's head of quantitative research, Dr. Michael Chen. Most algorithms try to beat the market through clever tricks or aggressive positioning. Oracle Genesis succeeds by understanding the market so thoroughly that it rarely makes mistakes. The acquisition included an unusual provision that reflected Rebecca's commitment to ethical technology development. 5% of all profits generated by Oracle Genesis would be donated to the Martinez Foundation, Rebecca's nonprofit organization dedicated to financial literacy education and protecting retail investors from predatory practices. Elena Rodriguez, now the foundation's executive director, had transformed their initial investor education program into a comprehensive platform serving over 500,000 people annually. The curriculum had evolved beyond algorithmic trading to cover cryptocurrency, scams, predatory lending, and other financial traps that targeted vulnerable populations. Rebecca could have used her success to simply make more money, Elena reflected during the foundation's annual gala. Instead, she chose to use it to prevent other people from experiencing what we went through. That says everything about who she really is. The foundation's impact extended far beyond education. Working with congressional allies, Elena and Rebecca had successfully lobbied for the Algorithmic Trading Transparency Act, federal legislation requiring all consumer-facing trading platforms to undergo rigorous testing and provide detailed performance disclosures. The law, signed by President Biden in 2023, was directly inspired by the Nexus disaster and Rebecca's advocacy for stronger consumer protections. Meanwhile, the broader fintech industry had learned harsh lessons from Nexus's collapse. Betrayal. Capital firms now conducted extensive technical due diligence before investing in algorithmic trading companies, often hiring independent experts to verify performance claims. The fake-it-till-you-make-it mentality that had enabled the Ashford brothers' deception was no longer tolerated by sophisticated investors. Marcus Thompson, the former Nexus developer whose whistleblowing had been crucial to exposing the truth, had used his SEC reward money to start his own ethical fintech consulting firm. His company specialized in helping startups avoid the technical and regulatory pitfalls that had destroyed his former employer. The Nexus case taught the entire industry that you can't build sustainable businesses on stolen or poorly understood technology, Thompson explained during a podcast interview. Rebecca's success has shown everyone what's possible when you combine genuine innovation with ethical business practices. Cameron Ashford had attempted a comeback after completing his probation, launching a blockchain consulting firm that promised to help traditional companies navigate cryptocurrency investments. The venture failed within 18 months, as potential clients were unwilling to trust their financial future to someone with Cameron's track record. He eventually took a mid-level position at a credit union in Sacramento, far from the Silicon Valley spotlight he had once craved. The contrast between the Ashford brothers' fates and Rebecca's triumph became a popular case study in business schools worldwide. Harvard Business School, where Cameron and Derek had once been celebrated as promising young entrepreneurs, now used their story to teach students about the importance of intellectual property law, ethical leadership, and sustainable business practices. Professor Sarah Martinez, no relation to Rebecca, at Stanford's Graduate School of Business, had made the Nexus case a centerpiece of her course on technology ethics. The story illustrates perfectly how short-term thinking and moral shortcuts can destroy not just individual companies, but entire ecosystems of trust, she explained to her students. Rebecca's influence on the financial technology industry extended well beyond her own company's success. Young entrepreneurs regularly sought her mentorship, hoping to learn from someone who had overcome such spectacular betrayal to build something genuinely valuable. She was selective about these relationships, choosing to work primarily with innovators whose goals aligned with her commitment to improving financial outcomes for ordinary people. One of her most successful mentees was Dr. Priya Patel, a former Google engineer who had developed revolutionary fraud detection algorithms for small banks. Under Rebecca's guidance, Patel had built her startup, Shield Financial, into a major force in community banking technology. The company's systems now protected over 3 million customer accounts from various forms of financial fraud. Rebecca taught me that true innovation isn't about building the flashiest technology, Patel reflected. It's about solving real problems for real people in ways that are sustainable and ethical. That philosophy has guided every decision we've made at Shield. As 2024 drew to a close, Rebecca found herself reflecting on the unexpected journey that had brought her from a frustrated Stanford graduate student to one of the most influential figures in financial technology. The theft of her original algorithm had been devastating at the time, but it had ultimately led to something far more meaningful than she could have achieved at Nexus. Oracle Genesis now managed over $500 billion in assets across institutional and retail platforms, generating consistent returns while maintaining the conservative risk management principles that had always been central to Rebecca's philosophy. More importantly, the system had proven that algorithmic trading could be both profitable and ethical, setting a new standard for the entire industry. The annual Martinez Foundation Gala had become one of Silicon Valley's most prestigious events, attracting technology leaders, policymakers, and financial professionals committed to building a more equitable financial system. This year's keynote speaker was Dr. Janet Yellen, the former Federal Reserve Chair and Treasury Secretary, who praised Rebecca's role in promoting financial transparency and consumer protection. Rebecca Martinez represents the best of American innovation, Secretary Yellen told the assembled guests. She took a devastating personal setback and transformed it into a force for positive change that has benefited millions of people. Her story proves that ethical leadership and business success are not just compatible, they're inseparable. During her own remarks that evening, Rebecca announced the Foundation's most ambitious project yet, a partnership with the Department of Education to integrate financial literacy curriculum into high school graduation requirements nationwide. The program would ensure that every American student learned how to evaluate investment opportunities, recognize financial scams, and make informed decisions about their economic future. We can't prevent every financial predator or eliminate every market risk, Rebecca told the audience, but we can make sure that every person has the knowledge they need to protect themselves and build genuine wealth over time. Standing on the stage that night, looking out at an audience of industry leaders who had once dismissed her ideas, Rebecca felt the profound satisfaction of vindication earned through perseverance and principle. The algorithm that had started as academic research, been stolen by greedy entrepreneurs, and nearly destroyed in their incompetent hands, had ultimately become the foundation for transforming an entire industry. But perhaps the most rewarding aspect of her journey was the knowledge that millions of people would make better financial decisions because of the educational programs, regulatory changes, and ethical standards her experience had inspired. The theft of her algorithm had been intended to rob her of success and recognition. Instead, it had become the catalyst for building something far more valuable, a financial system that actually served the people it claimed to help. Rebecca Martinez had not just survived corporate betrayal, she had transformed it into a legacy that would benefit generations of investors, entrepreneurs, and innovators. Sometimes, she realized, the greatest victories emerge from the most devastating defeats. And sometimes, the best revenge is simply building something so much better that it makes the original theft seem like a favor in disguise. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, These are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.